We will start with a speech by Jacques Cheminade. Jacques is the president of Solidarite Progres in France, and he will speak on the topic, the rise of the global south against geopolitical blocs. Jacques, can you please come? And please get seated by now.
Thank you very much to all of you for being here, so that we can all go further together this morning. For as someone said, when we're alone we may go faster, but when we're together we go further.
Ici à Strasbourg, face au risque d'embrasement du monde. Ce risque que l'humanité
We're gathered here in Strasbourg at a time when there is a risk of conflagration in the world, the risk that humanity will one day annihilate itself in monstrous destruction, as Charles de Gaulle feared. Today, we're experiencing the first signs of it in Europe, and particularly in my own country, France. At such tragic moments, it is essential to restore hope. That's why I want to begin by showing you the 4 bas-reliefs on the base of the statue commemorating Gutenberg, which is just a few minutes' walk from here. It's a work that was executed in 1844 by David d'Angers that carries the impetus of social emancipation for all the peoples of the world. So you see here 4 bas-reliefs at the basis of the statue to Gutenberg, and you will find those who participated in emancipating all the peoples of the world. Here you have Europe, and you'll see you have here the emancipation of the slaves, according to the representation at the time, which is Africa. And you'll see Abbot Gregoire here. And here you have America. You have Franklin, Washington, and Lafayette. It's very interesting to see how all these come together. It's interesting to see all the together, Schiller, Franklin, Confucius, Ram Mohan Roy, Erasmus of Rotterdam, Mahmud II, and Abbot Gregoire. From this Ram Mohan Roy, the Tagore family from Indian Bengal, was the political and spiritual heir in the 20th century. And Rabindranath Tagore is the most accomplished expression of this heritage. Xi Jinping addressed the 23rd summit of the Shanghai Economic Cooperation Organization on July 4th, quoting, and I quote, the great Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore. And this is a quote from the poet: the sea of danger, doubt, and denial that surrounds man's little island of certainty challenges him to dare the unknown. We must rise to the call to action of our time. In the midst of the storm, here and now, this is the call we hear from the countries of the global south and east, and of the global east. The 23rd SCO summit was attended by Modi, Xi Jinping, and Putin, representatives of East Asian countries, Pakistan, and new SCO member Iran. Discussions focused on security, respect for national sovereignty, and the desire to gradually develop trade in national currencies rather than dollars. In all, representatives of over 40% of the world's population were representative. If we add to this the members of the BRICS Plus, we're talking about over 66% of the world's population. And in terms of national projects, it's almost the same percentage, measured in purchasing power parity, that is, in the production of physical goods. So clearly, Western countries are proportionally in the minority, very much a minority. This shifting of the world is not a partial or temporary phenomenon, but a global groundswell. It's a matter of life and death. The battle between the Malthusian, domineering financial oligarchy that occupies our Western countries and those who believe that the human species has a right to development, has the right proclaimed by Lazare Carnot to elevate all individuals of the human species to the dignity of man. The countries of the Global South have clearly understood that the banking of counterfeit money by the G7 central banks has resulted in the accumulation of fictitious capital in the form of debt and financial securities to their detriment, to the detriment of their peoples and their producers. They've understood that this neoliberalism, organized and protected by military means and physical threats, imprisons them in the trap of continuous indebtedness. They've realized that the liberalism of the Washington Consensus imposed on them the freedom of financial foxes in their little chicken coops, states. But that no longer applies whenever it's necessary to divert public funds to save the possessions of the financial oligarchy or arbitrarily freeze the assets of those who oppose it. At that point, the money will be frozen or given out, depending on the interest of the financial oligarchy. The Global South has understood that the damage inflicted on them, the dismantling of their social services and public sectors, has not been done by mistake or oversight, but with the conscious aim of preying upon them. They've understood that they are the victims of a rigged economy in which the dollar is militarized, a weapon of war pointed at them. So it should come as no surprise that they feel concerned when Vladimir Putin says at the St. Petersburg Forum, just held from June 14th to 17th, I quote, "Today, around 90% of trade within the member countries of the Eurasian Economic Union is conducted in rubles, and 86% of trade with China is conducted in rubles and yuan. This means that the harmful neocolonial international system has ceased to exist." That was Vladimir Putin at the St. Petersburg Forum. It should come as no surprise that the Russian-Chinese alliance, consecrated on February 4th, 2022, appears to them as a positive option and a chance, an opportunity to escape the transatlantic straitjacket. And when Xi Jinping speaks of the common future of mankind, they see that China, without preaching more or less hypocritical moral lessons to them, is building bridges, railroads, dams, or harbors. And thus, they see that the words are followed by deeds. Even if the achievements are imperfect, for them it's better to have something than the almost nothing from the West. With this in mind, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Brazilian President Lula, and Chinese Premier Li Qiang each addressed Emmanuel Macron at the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact held in Paris on June 22nd, where they criticized the existing financial institutions and what remains of the Bretton Woods order. Lula tore up his prepared speech to condemn the inequalities in the governance of international financial institutions and called for a new order that responds to the aspirations of the world. These countries of the global south, we are told, are not united and have no common project. That may be so, but they do have a common rejection. They have understood that Western leaders are wary of China's development because they think in geopolitical terms of friend and foe, and fear those who challenge their privileges, the privileges of the transatlantic world. In the growing number of international meetings, which the Western media report so little up on, links are being organized outside of the dollar system, which is no longer even an American currency, but that of a financial oligarchy reigning over a market economy without a market. The Schiller Institute welcomes this development as a fundamental step toward a road to peace through mutual development. For those who don't know, because it's not the kind of thing the Western media report about, Russian economist Sergei Glazyev, Minister of Integration of the Eurasian Economic Union, Mr. Glazyev, who's organizing today the implementation of de-dollarization, he declared on September 8, 2022, that it is the principles of physical economics championed by Lyndon LaRouche that underpin the Chinese miracle today and that are the basis of India's economic development policy. And for those who don't know, I would just add that Helge Sepp-LaRouche, the president and founder of the International Schiller Institute, is Ms. Lyndon LaRouche's wife. This means that the long struggle we have waged and continue to wage is in the name of LaRouche's conception of a successful economic policy, increasing the potential for relative economic density, a welcome policy that is anti-Malthusian in principle, a policy that creates the possibility of welcoming more people than the number now existing. LaRouche's conception, based on the human capacity to discern new physical principles applied in the form of technologies that produce more with less physical effort, goes beyond the short-term appearances of those sense organs that lack the capacity to think and allow themselves to be obsessed by external things, as mentioned by Mencius, the spiritual heir of Confucius. He added, as long as we begin to build what is great, smallness will never prevail within us. That presupposes, of course, the long-term vision we lack today in our world of money, currency, and immediate appearance. Let's listen to Tagore and his Religion of Man, before or perhaps after his dialogue with Einstein. Of all creatures, man alone lives in an endless future. Our present is only a part of it. The ideas unborn, the unbodied spirits, tease our imagination with an insistence that makes them even more real to our intelligence than the things around us. End of quote.
Nous ne venons pas en mendiant. Nous n'allons pas solliciter des faveurs de l'un ou l'autre des belligérants, a déclaré Cyril Ramaphosa. Nous voulons être des acteurs essentiels. Nous voulons être des acteurs essentiels sur la scène mondiale.
It was in this spirit that 7 African countries organized a delegation of mediators in the Ukrainian conflict. We're not here as beggars. We're not going to ask for favors from one or other of the belligerents, declared Cyril Ramaphosa. We want to be essential players on the world stage. The South is thus directly and independently involved in the affairs of the North outside the realm of NATO. Under Chinese auspices, Saudi Arabia and Iran are renewing diplomatic relations. An Africa-Russia summit will be held in Petersburg on July 26 and 27. India is using Chinese yuan and even UAE dirhams to buy oil from Russia. And even Total is concluding a contract involving the Emirates and China on production. So we're going into a world where the yuan is becoming an essential currency, as Dilma Rousseff said, the chairman of the New Development Bank. Emmanuel Macron, in the meantime, is trying to get invited to the 15th BRICS summit to be held from August 22nd to 24th in Johannesburg. But another member country, Russia, feels that he has no place there as an adherent to the NATO line. But it would probably be good for him to be there to have an idea of what is really happening in the world outside of the bank offices. So the world is changing and becoming multilateral. Western leaders are slowly waking up to this fact. It's not from then that we can expect a step toward peace in the world, because to accept its foundations would be to put an end to the preponderance of the oligarchy that dominates them. It is therefore the rise of the global South that offers a chance for peace outside the logic of blocs. We have seen how this is taking shape and how necessary it is for us Europeans to follow this rise and to understand its causes. But that is not enough. We need to rediscover our own national sovereignty and independence, buoyed by this example. This is the first of the 10 points proposed by the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute for our consideration. And this requires not only a change of direction in the politics of our countries, but also within ourselves. France and even European countries alone cannot change the direction of a world that is self-destructing under piles of counterfeit money and increasingly destructive weapons. We must be supported by this planetary, this global South, to prevent us from continuing to be the victims in which a war economy will lead us to war, and a war that will cross the nuclear threshold of our destruction if we don't pull out the roots that are leading to it. This means defining together the new architecture of peace through mutual security and development that the countries of the global South are rightly demanding. This is a force without which, given the interlocking production and value chains of today's Western countries, we will not be able to change direction. It's with this voice, along with China, the SCO, and the BRICS, that my country should raise its voice at the United Nations Security Council. We have fewer excuses than others, for we're the only country in Western Europe without American bases, and, at least for now, which has an independent nuclear military force and civilian industry. To avoid a future war among blocs, even we escape the present threat, our challenge is to change the economic, political, and cultural direction of all the countries of the Atlantic world by making our peoples understand that they are suffering within our countries the same damage as that's inflicted on the countries of the global south, in which they are attempting to free themselves from. Citizens of the world, unite. But this presupposes an effort on our part to stimulate our curiosity and imagination to explore the unknown, without any fascination for violence or submission. I would say our imagination to explore what we don't know, with no violence or submission, I repeat. We need the capacity for each citizen to prioritize collective interest over personal interest, so that the advances in knowledge of the world that are the expression of our sovereignty can lead to a higher level in which the concordance of opposites becomes the harmony of dissonances. That's what I was thinking confusedly between French culture and Argentine culture myself, looking to the crux, the Southern Cross, constellation of my childhood, to find something beyond that encompasses both of these cultures without betraying either. Let's dare the unknown so that the beauty of the world is not destroyed.
So let's applaud on that also. So we will continue the international dialogue of citizens of the world, as Jacques just said, with a speech by Julio Miguel de Vido. He's the former Minister of Federal Planning, Public Investment and Services from 2003 to 2015 in Argentina. This was the governments of both Nestor and Cristina Kirchner in Argentina. The topic of this speech, which we will hear by video, is planning for integration and growth with the BRICS, charting a course amid risks. So, can we please have the video?
Buenas tardes a todos, buenos días. Quiero comenzar esta exposición que titulé Planificar para integrarse, cooperar y crecer desde los BRICS, sus sesgos y sus riesgos. Agradeciendo en primer lugar al Instituto Schiller, a Elke de la Rouge.
Good afternoon, good day to all of you. I would like to begin this presentation, which I titled Planning for Integration, Cooperation and Growth with the BRICS, Missteps and Risks, by first thanking the Schiller Institute, Helge Zepp-LaRouche, and Dennis Small for the honor of being invited to this conference. I have been able to reflect on the working paper by Dennis Small and Mary Jane Freeman entitled Some LaRouche Essentials for the Transition to a New International Financial System. Here is my contribution to that reflection. The disappearance of the global financial system as we know it today depends on the success of the BRICS, conceived of as the possibility of putting together a platform for intercontinental integration of economies that paradoxically have as an advantage large natural resource reserves and a determining role in the global supply chain, energy, food, water, and biodiversity, and as a disadvantage that they bring together very powerful real or potential economies, but very unequal ones. A simple review of the social landscape of many of these countries provides the evidence of these asymmetries. Therefore, my view is that in addition to the agenda of speaking honestly and taking a stand about the war between Ukraine and Russia, and the agenda of domination itself that perpetuates dependence on the world financial system, thanks to organizations such as NATO, it is necessary to build that platform for integration, which is the BRICS, with an eye to and respecting the sovereign views of those countries, connecting their willingness to cooperate to trade ties and definitions and foreign policy issues that go along with it. The situation today is one of a delicate balance. There are many of us who agree with the need for a new way of participating in the institutions of global governance, especially among the countries that share a common history of struggle against imperialism, colonialism, exploitation, and underdevelopment. But there are many missteps and risks if the foreign policy and the insertion strategies are not clear in their characterization and are erratic. In addition, the agreements and commitments to represent the so-called Global South must be balanced and firm within each of the countries, those that today make up BRICS and those like Argentina that seek to join that bloc.
El momento histórico y el contexto nos debe animar hoy. Señala Dennis Moll que la única manera de resolver el dilema Argentina-Brasil-BRICS versus Fondo Monetario Internacional.
The historical moment and the context should encourage us today. Dennis Small writes that, quote, the only way the Argentina-Brazil BRICS versus IMF conundrum will be solved is by getting China's Belt and Road Initiative actively underway in the region, to put shovels in the ground and start building the long-awaited bioceanic rail corridors across the continent, in particular, based on multi-billion non-dollar credit lines, close quote. I would like to recall here that Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela, led at that time by Nestor Kirchner, Evo Morales, Lula da Silva, Rafael Correa, Nicanor Duarte Frutos, Tabaré Vázquez, and Hugo Chávez, respectively, we signed in 2007 the founding charter of the Bank of the South, guided by the purpose of developing, promoting, and fostering the economic and social integration of the member nations of UNASUR, Union of South American Nations. The process of creating this Bank of the South was part of the joint commitment to create a new regional financial architecture. It was a way to prevent national savings from flowing to more developed economies instead of being invested in regional projects. In a way, it was for us a first step to get out of the financial and trade globalization of the time and to be able to revitalize investment, correct asymmetries, and develop integrating infrastructure. In short, the goal was to mitigate the foreign vulnerability of our region.
Lo vivimos hoy como una experiencia fallida del bloque regional del UNASUR.
Unfortunately, we recognize it today as a failed experience of the UNASUR regional bloc. The non-collaborative technical administrative superstructure during the first years of UNASUR's life, with their procrastination, opened the door to a reconfiguration of forces that, by 2011, had an impact on the integration process and, of course, on the project of the bank, as a result of the political changes in the region. The effort and political will of many of us with experience in government administration to break the U.S.'s hegemony and enter fully into multilateralism and into a change in the international order has to aim at, first, define what we mean by the Global South. I find it necessary to characterize the subject. Today we know the potential of the G7 with low representation in terms of world population, 10%, and an economic size of 31% of world GDP. We know the potential of the BRICS, with high population representation, 40% of the world's population, and an economic size of 24% in terms of world GDP. The open question is to estimate its geopolitical weight in order to establish joint positions regarding world political and economic functioning to counterbalance a G7 that today includes industrialized countries with a BRICS composed of countries that appear to be in political and economic crisis as a result of submission to the prescriptions of the multilateral credit institutions.
Segundo, atender de forma urgente las vulnerabilidades compartidas de las economías del sur global.
Second, urgently address the shared vulnerabilities of the economies of the Global South. We have seen that the assessment of the so-called Agenda 2030 in these countries, which the UN imposed as part of the world order, is that it was a failure. I'm talking about poverty, inequality, climate change. As presented in the agenda, sustainable development went over the top. As a result, and by way of example, extractivism as a fundamental tool for the concentration of wealth that limits development, and also for the export of natural resources, which in my country is a way of obtaining dollars to pay the debt to the IMF, are clearly very dangerous ways of acting in disregard of sustainable development, environmental and social.
Este reconocimiento de la realidad hacia adentro de los países debe ser la plataforma de trabajo de los BRICS para la recuperación económica.
This recognition of the reality within countries should be the platform from which the BRICS work for the global economic recovery, which we seek to lead from there to position these emerging economies on the path of development and self-sufficiency, which, along with the type of proposals being analyzed in this forum, will allow us to define a new world order. One such proposal, to quote Small and Freeman when they pose the need for a new currency, quote, "Productive credit must be issued in that new currency to finance great development projects with a heavy emphasis on science and advanced technologies in and among participating nations to quickly boost the physical economies and thereby provide the only possible solid backing for the value and stability of the new currency." Close quote.
Bajo estas premisas, dar forma a un nuevo orden internacional que sea.
In that light, we must bring a new international order into being that is truly inclusive, equitable, fair, and sustainable, one that allows for reforms to be agreed upon and planned in the areas of energy, transportation, and infrastructure, as well as the greatest possible investment from the BRICS in the economies of its partner nations to allow for the growth of local industry in each of them, as well as the real improvement in the indicators of the Agenda 2030 guidelines, and an ongoing improvement in foreign trade and market access. In the short term, the BRICS platform must help member countries resolve their debts with multilateral credit institutions, supporting the growth of each of them, the creation of genuine employment, and the improvement in the living conditions of their inhabitants, and over the long term, establish new financing mechanisms outside those institutions and the mandates of the United States and its allies.
Y sus aliados, las potencias hegemónicas. Entiendo que por allí.
My understanding is that that is the path to launch the New World Economic Agenda so that the world financial system, as we know it today, disappears, and so that the BRICS can create a counterweight in global geopolitics under conditions of respect from the West for the so-called Global South. Thank you for your attention.
So now we go to Turkey. That is, we will have a video by the chairman of the Vatan party in Turkey, Dr. Doğu Perinçek. And the topic of this speech is the decisive importance of the alliance between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and China at the edge of entering the Eurasian era. Can we have the video, please?
Honorable President, dear friends and comrades who have joined our conference from the 7 continents, I am greeting you with the spirit of the great desires of humanity. The fact that we are meeting today at the Schiller Institute is meaningful. The great poet of humanism, Friedrich Schiller, wrote his famous play Turandottir in 1801. Turandottir was a proud Asian princess. Today, after 222 years, we are gathered here as the heirs of the unbending head of Turandottir. We have come to the end of the Atlantic era. A new civilization emerged from Asia. The states of West Asia are the front line of humanity. Russia's war in Ukraine against US imperialism is the fight of all us. On this front, we joined Russian heroism, we joined the resistance of the Alexander Nevsky's, Kutuzov's, Stalin's, and Putin's. Right now, in the Eastern Mediterranean, US guns are pointed from military bases on Greek shores towards Türkiye. Therefore, the US threat the future of Greek peoples too. Türkiye keeps here the watch for humanity. Syria, Iraq, Türkiye, and Iran are fighting with arms together against the US project of a second Israel labeled Kurdistan. The emerging unity between Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf Emirates, and Yemen is historic importance. especially the beginning of the process of Iran joining the Organization of Turkic States, is of extraordinary value for the unification of Asia. China provides bravery and hope to all humanity with its insistence on constructing socialism and its awareness in the Strait of Taiwan. Dear friends and comrades, today the north of Syria is the key part of this front line. Here we have forces and a strategy position that is superior to that US imperialism. Due to given circumstances, Russia, Türkiye, Syria, and Iran are not able to pursue joint operations and maneuvers in the Ukraine front. But in the north of Syria, all four of these states are present with their military forces. The front line of Black Sea, Mediterranean, Iran-Arabian Sea can be united with the north of Syria. And such a practice will be start of a process to expel the United States from our region and from Ukraine too. Joint operations in Syria with the goal to eliminate US-led separatist and religious extremist terror organizations will not only ensure Syria's territorial integrity, they will also constitute a decisive offensive for the security of West Asia and the world's peace. The joint military operation will, first, liberate the Turkish state from pursuing, hesitating, and contradictory practices and ensure its positioning in the joint front. Second, confront the United States with the problem of fighting at a several fronts simultaneously. Third, strengthen Russia's position on the Ukraine front. Fourth, strengthen China's position in the Taiwan Strait. Honorable friends and comrades, in 2017, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Russia acted together and foiled the US and Israel attempts to establish a so-called Kurdistan in the north of Iraq. Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Russia have displayed a joint approach and practice in the Karabakh War. As a result, the United States could not set even one foot in the Caucasus. These practices show that the unity of West Asian countries within the Turkish-Russian axis provide a model of a peace and security. Now is the time to broaden this model to all regions of confrontation. In that context, first, a joint position needs to be taken against NATO enlargement to the east. NATO must be stopped. Second, a united front must be established with the goal of closing down all US and NATO military bases. Third, Crimea is territory of the Russian Federation. The Donetsk and Luhansk regions, as well as Zaporozhye and Kherson, are part of the Russian Federation. These facts must be recognized officially and openly. Fourth, the independence of the Republic of Abkhazia must be recognized. Fifth, Azerbaijan's struggle to liberate its territories under occupation must be supported. Sixth, in the Eastern Mediterranean, the struggle of the region states to defend their blue homeland against the excess of US-Israel must be supported. Unfortunately, Greece is acting under the guidance of the US-Israel camp in the regard. Seventh, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus must be recognized. The reason, if the United States gains control over entire Cyprus, they will dominate all routes from the Suez Canal to the Strait of Hormuz. 8. All efforts should be pursued with determination to end Israel's occupation of Arab lands. Moreover, all measures must be applied to ensure the establishment of a united, independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital city. Ninth, the United States sanctions to various countries of the world should not be recognized nor applied. These sanctions should be turned into golden opportunities to further develop cooperation between regional countries. 10th, institutions like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, Asian Union, Arab Liga, and the Organization of Turkic States unite the region's countries against hegemonism. Unity, solidarity, and integration among these organizations must be developed further. 11th, the People's Republic of China's Belt and Road Initiative for a shared development must be advanced further. 12th, works to pursue international trade in national currencies and to establish joint regional currencies must be intensified. 13th, we cannot prevent nuclear war by fearing nuclear war. It is revolution that will prevent nuclear war. The joint struggle of states seeking independence against U.S. hegemony will prevent nuclear war. If the United States launches nuclear war before the revolution, humanity's response to nuclear war will in any case be revolution. However, the rising trend today is the struggle of humanity against U.S. hegemony led by states that seek independence. U.S. imperialism is on the decline and lacks the strength to go crazy for launching a nuclear war. Dear friends and comrades, may the words of our great poet Yunus Emre enlighten the path ahead. How high the mountain ever may be, the road passes over its summit. Our common hopes and desires provide us with extraordinary power. Asia's heritage of great empires and revolutions has taught us to live in pride and brotherly. As a Turkish nation, we promise to fight with our heads up on the front line for the construction of the Asian civilization. I greet respectfully and wholeheartedly all the fighters gathered here. Together we will fight for the new civilization that is not individualist and profit-driven, but is sharing, public-oriented, statist, freedom-loving, peaceful, and that strengthens the independence of national states.
May I now ask Patricia Lalonde to come? Oh, there you are. Very good. We will hear from Mrs. Lalonde, who is a former member of the European Parliament and associate researcher at the Institut Prospective et Sécurité en Europe, IPSE, in France. And she will speak on Syria, Reasons for Hope. Please.
I would like to first thank the Schiller Institute for having set up this very interesting conference, and that is really changing our minds from what the media are saying. So I'm at the head of a think tank called Geopolitical, and it's very in agreement with the way the Schiller Institute is judging the international events. The other institution that I am heading has changed its politics, unfortunately, and is really supporting Ukraine. It's the other institution, Institut Prospective Institute for Security in Europe, IPSE. For the past 7 years, the Syrian people have stood behind their president, Bashar al-Assad, in the face of a war of aggression orchestrated by the 3 Western members of the United Nations Security Council, supported by a coalition calling itself the Friends of Syria, who got 120 members in 2001 and just a dozen members in April 2012. It was an unacknowledged but fully assumed alliance with the Islamists. 400,000 jihadists, more or less moderate, rushed in from all corners to act as proxies for the West and took part in this holy war. All this, of course, in the name of human rights in the wake of the Arab Springs, supposed to bring democracy in their regime change delirium. The Syrian army held out violently for 4.5 years, obviously with the help of its regional allies and the intervention demanded by the Syrian government of Russia, which turned the situation around, and in September 2015 marked the beginning of the retreat of these Islamist armed bands. 2018 will mark the political and military victory of Bashar al-Assad. This incredible defeat of Westerners against the Syrian army has had the effect of uniting the Syrian people behind their president. I've just returned from a mission to Damascus and the surrounding region, organized by the France-Syria Association, during which we met the civil and religious authorities, diplomats, the Minister of Culture, humanitarian aid workers and journalists. Everything we saw and heard left us indignant at the suffering experienced by the Syrian people, and at the same time full of admiration for this proud people. The Syrian people are indeed incredibly resilient, proud to have resisted and won. The men and women we were able to meet were all of the highest quality and competence, speaking their minds. We were struck by their religious tolerance, because the Syrian people have suffered 500,000 deaths, 2 million wounded and crippled, 6 million displaced, thrown onto the roads, and of course not forgetting the victims of last January's earthquake. Damascus has been completely rebuilt. The Umayyad Mosque, the churches, the Damascus Museum, everything has been rebuilt, making us forget the terror experienced by the Christians hunted down by the Islamists. These poor nuns who had been kidnapped by Daesh for several months met in Malula were witnesses to this. The city is clean. In the streets, many generators make up for power cuts. So when you stay in the center of the city, everything is clean, as everything is very clean and rebuilt. But when you go in the suburb area, there you see, like, for example, a firm has been destroyed by the Islamists, and people tell you that they killed the workers in a very atrocious circumstances. But Syria has regained control of its destiny. Italy and Greece have reopened their embassies, and discussions are underway with Germany and Spain. We must hope that France will follow suit, as the road to Damascus could well become indispensable and necessary for our future ties with the Middle East. Indeed, its reintegration into the Arab League, despite the initial reluctance of some, such as Qatar, marks the start of a new era for Syria, whether the West likes it or not. The European Union, a sore loser, cringed, and our French Foreign Minister, Catherine Colonna, dared to issue a statement denouncing the decision, but no one paid any attention to it anymore. The historic agreement between Shiite Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia, under the aegis of Beijing, was another shock for Westerners.
Alors, un autre point important, c'est l'accord historique entre l'Iran chiite et l'arabe sunnite sous l'égide de Pékin.
Yeah.
Et cela aussi, je pense, ça a été un grand choc pour les
Occidentaux. Yeah, this historic agreement was a big shock for Westerners. When we were there, there was also a Chinese delegation who was received in Damascus immediately afterwards to discuss reconstruction. Secret negotiations were opened in Oman between Syrian and Americans, proof of the latter's disarray and fear of being replaced in the Middle East. The departure of foreign troops, and above all American troops, is undoubtedly at the heart of the negotiations. Iran, Russia and the Arab League are now imposing their agenda upon the region. In neighboring Lebanon, events are also gathering pace. Hezbollah, now a force to be reckoned with, is negotiating Saudi support for the election of Salman Frangi, a candidate in the forthcoming elections, and in favor of a much-needed reconciliation with the Syrian regime. The French president was initially in favor, but it seems he came under some pressure. And the dispatch of our former foreign minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, is unlikely to make things any easier. But without waiting for the election of a new president in Lebanon, Damascus and Beirut are trying to resolve the problems. The proof is in the meeting in Damascus of the minister in charge of displaced Syrian and his Lebanese counterpart in charge of refugees. They reached an agreement to try to overcome the serious crisis caused by Syrian refugees in Lebanon. It was agreed to return a first wave of 180,000 refugees as soon as possible. While the Arab League countries and China are going to help rebuild the country, the European Union is taking a cautious approach to ensure that humanitarian aid does not pass through the Syrian regime, preferring to continue its deal with the Islamist HTC, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in Idlib province. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Martin Griffiths, who I could met in the past, and who was incidentally the Special Envoy for Yemen, which suffered one of the worst humanitarian crises, is fighting at the UN to have this aid extended into northwest Syria via Turkey without going through the Damascus authorities. And yet it is in the regions under his authority that the majority of Syrians live and need help. The sanctions that have been falling down on Syria since the start of the war, and which continue despite the earthquake, are having an impact on the Syrian people. China is calling for increased humanitarian support and for the lifting of illegal sanctions against Syria. We had the opportunity to meet a young American when we were in Damascus. He was the head of an NGO whose aim was to divert the sanctions and hand over the money directly to the Syrian authorities. Well, we found this pretty interesting and wrote some articles about it. Some countries, such as Italy and Greece, have not followed European instructions. So there are archaeologists who are on hand to help bring this incredible heritage back to life. Palmyra has been rebuilt. A delegation of Australian bishops is currently visiting places of worship and archaeological sites in Aleppo. It is to be feared that European countries will be divided over their attitude to Syria, since good relations with Syria will be the gateway to relations with the Middle East and the global South. France, which we hope will suddenly become aware of the mistakes it has made and the time it has wasted. The Syrian officials we met were unanimous. They don't want revenge for our abandonment. The Syrian people want the suffering to end. They want to rebuild their country. Some European countries, as well as countries in the Arab world, are reopening their representations in Damascus and setting up cooperation budget, while France still has only one French representative for Syria. We mustn't remain deaf and blind at a time where everything has changed in the country's regional environment. The international community has found itself divided into two sets of enemies who seek each other out and measure themselves against each other in a global confrontation. The West, dominant and self-confident, a very small minority, and on the other side, the rest of the planet, the vast majority of the community of nations, seeking to take its rightful place. Syria has carved out a place for itself in the field of victors, and it is to them that it will appeal first and foremost for reconstruction, as well as to the repentant Arab countries and a few European countries that have not cut their ties, the Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Cyprus, Italy and Greece. France's relations with Damascus and the Middle East could prevent us from remaining embroiled in the camp of arrogance at a time where the world needs humility and solidarity more than ever to face up the many challenges posed by global poverty and the upheaval caused by climate change. Time is running out. Let's not miss this opportunity to reconnect with the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Merci beaucoup.
Mrs. Lalonde, for this hopeful report. And I take hope in the sense of we have to work for it to make it really happen. So thank you. Now we hear from Dora Mwanda, who is here. Very good. Thank you. Come, please, up. She's a teacher, biologist, and she is a scientific director of the Kinshasa Science and Technology Week from Democratic Republic of Congo, and she speaks to us about humanity and Africa need science.
Je vais parler en français. Est-ce que vous m'entendez tous?
So I will speak in French. Can you hear me? It's great. Humanity needs Africa. Africa needs science. And let me add that science needs women. Not there is no science in Africa, not that there is no woman in science, but in both cases there are not enough of them, and in both cases there is a lack of visibility. Less than 1% of all scientific production and publication worldwide come from African countries. The health, ecological and climate crises have clearly demonstrated just how complex and interconnected the challenges are. Whatever the level of challenge facing humanity, we need all possible perspectives of response. Doing without the experience, knowledge and know-how of the southern part of the planet is a luxury. We simply can no longer afford it. If we want to build sustainable solution where everyone can develop. Whatever the vision behind the world development, we have to recognize that science and technology remain a powerful lever for the emergence of a nation. In 2023, any nation that does not master its technologies is shooting itself in the foot. In this context, how do you take responsibility when you are part of a triple minority of being African, Black and scientist? Hello the world. My name is Dora Mwanda and I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo and grew up. Science and Technology Week. So I am in charge of the scientific pole of the DRC Science and Technology Week. So, with Raïsia Malou, which is a physician, black woman, so we start the Science and Technology Week in République démocratique of Congo, because we are coming from there. We met in Belgium. I was born in Congo, but I'm living in Belgium. But I work every year for this scientific week. So Science and Technology Week is a science festival aimed at promoting scientific culture among Congolese youth. We have to find a way for our own children to train and doing experiments. You can have an idea of what we are doing. It's in Kinshasa. And so, Science and Technology Week in DRC is a science festival aimed at promoting scientific culture among Congolese youth and bringing together the worlds of science, academia, business and politics. So, we implement this festival for science and technology to be able to touch all the young people. They can come with their classes. And we have all our scientific material for them. They can do experiments. And we are not working only on science, because most of the time scientists are only working in science. So they are doing experiments, scientific experiments, but then they have to be able to explain a complex principle in simple terms for different audience, from the people from very low school to high school are coming to our festival. So we are training students to be able to do the experiment, but also to communicate with simple idea the principle that we are experimenting. It was very important for nous to have a space where scientists can get out of their laboratory and communicate on what they are doing, because you have Congolese scientists, if they are not talking to the children, to the student, the children and the student don't know about them. So it's very difficult to have financing. So it's very, very complicated to obtain funding, which is why it's so important to create windows, space where scientists can inform and communicate about what they are doing, if only to increase the chances that one day public money will be massively invested in this field. That's why the politicians are not investing enough in the scientific domain for the children and the students. That's why we created this festival 10 years ago, for communication and information about our scientists.
On peut passer de slide. Donc, voilà, ça c'est, on a en 10 ans, on a
in 10 years, it was more than 60,000 visitors which came to our festivals, because we are working with the Ministry of the Technological and Ministry of Technology and Science and the Research Minister also. And they are organizing the school to be able to come every day. We can have all the classes of all the university to access to our festival. Another experimentation about how the galaxy is working. Other thing.
On peut passer à la slide suivante. Notre modèle, c'est que nous formons un groupe, chaque année, un groupe de 50
so we are training 50 students. And this is these 50 students which have been trained. We will make the experiment with the children, with the students. We call that investigating people. So if the students are coming in the science village, they can see that they are training, they are experimenting, they have fun with that. So it's for the students it's better to have the real scientists, and that science is complicated or is not elitist. Everybody can do it. And we can become scientists if we don't know what is science. And if we go on internet, all the videos of scientists are often white men who are doing science, and women, and black women even less. There is almost nothing. That's why it's very important for us to create, this model for our children, can see that science is also what we are doing. Young students, black women doing experiments, science, and teaching it.
En parlant de représentativité, c'est la suivante. En parlant de représentativité, pendant le Covid,
so we have organized 3 nationwide competitions, and during the school closure due to the COVID-19 crisis, so we decide produce 44 popular science videos which are posted on our YouTube channel, helping to increase the representation of African scientists online. Like this, we can have young scientist women doing science video. But to watch the video, you need to have an internet connection. But in Kinshasa, as you know, it's very expensive, and not everybody has electricity. So knowing that this internet connection data is expensive, our video were also broadcast on television through the Learn at Home program because of the COVID. And we also try out podcast lesson in the form of short science story that could be broadcast on the radio to reach as many people as possible. So we did this podcast, small story, small scientific story, broadcasted on the radio, because even in the poorer area of Kinshasa or in the country, they have access to this program.
Voilà, alors en quelques chiffres, nous avons accueilli, je vous ai dit, plus de 60 000 visiteurs. Nous avons formé 400 élèves.
60,000 visitors.
Nous avons fait notre 10e édition en avril.
It was the 10th session, so we will publish a report soon.
Les chiffres sont encore plus hauts. Nous avons chaque année au moins
Every year we have 17 trainers who are helping us to train the 50 children chosen to be who will train the experiment. So we invite the public sector, the private sector to come and present their industry. But now here, if you want to find something, you go on Google but it's not the same in Kinshasa. Not everybody has internet. It's not the same thing. There is a lot of things which are not in internet. So now we invite the public sector and the private one. We invite a lot of people from internationally, and we organize 3 to boost creativity of the children, of the students, with challenges by using science and technology. And the first one was we asked all the province of Congo to produce a scientific poster to deal with a local problem that they can see in their environment. For example, the Lac Kivu issue, what's problem, and we asked them to propose a solution, and then they come in Kinshasa to present their solution for this problem that they have locally. So they are facing directly a local problem that they are facing every day in their daily life. So it was one of the challenges we launched to the students of all the country. Next slide, please. You can see in all the province, this year, it was in 12 provinces on 26 provinces of the country who participated in the festival Science. In all these provinces, young students organize experiments, scientific experiments for their community. So we are creating a community of young scientists organizing themselves in their province for their local community experiment to discover principles in science. Instilling a taste for science in young people gives us a chance to produce citizens capable of innovation, who, better than Africans themselves and local inhabitants in general, to think up innovative solutions to the problem they are at first to face. If we want that the Democratic Republic of Congo to be able to play its part on the world stage one day, it won't happen by chance. It is something we have to organize as a society, as a nation, with a long-term vision. It's a plan that must be carried out intentionally by the political sector as much as by the private and public sector, and of course politically. Humanity needs Africa. I am not talking about the continent and its mineral resources. Humanity needs Africans as people and their perspective on global issues. Africa needs to invest in themselves through education, research, science and technology. And science, forgive me for insisting, needs the perspective of women so that tomorrow's world is fairer, not just for the northern and the southern half, but for the whole humanity across the globe. I am a teacher. I will give you a task to do at home. The first part of your humanity is your family. So if you are grandparents, and if you have problem with this kind of things, we call it smartphone, don't call your grandchildren to solve it, but call your young woman. Not only need the guys to solve the problem, but call the girls also. If you have great children, which is a girl, ask them to solve the problem, not only the men. So please do it. Ask woman, your sister, your child, and call them to solve the problem. If you are parents, if you have children who are going to school, they are doing research. So ask them to get out of the comfort zone. Do you think of an African leader or an African thinker, an African scientist? Work on this guy, work on this girl. Study. For example, I have children say, oh, you should investigate if you have a scientist. And most of the time, children say, oh, but we have no scientists in our country. So we have to teach them to look for that, because you have scientists everywhere. You have, so you can do that when you are at home. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this challenge and the inspiration to actually do that. Now we here have a video from Mr. Herve Machenaud. He's the former executive director of the EDF Group, that is Électricité de France, for engineering and generation, and he's former director of the Asia-Pacific branch in France. His speech is on the history of France-China relations, the example of nuclear power. Can we have that video, please?
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, Madame la Présidente, Messieurs les Présidents, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers amis.
Mr. Ambassador, Madam President, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am particularly pleased and grateful to have been invited by the Schiller Institute to speak about what I believe, in all objectivity, to be one of, or perhaps even, the finest cooperation project in international industrial history. I am talking about cooperation between France and China in the field of civil nuclear power. In the early 1980s, France was chosen by China to help her launch its nuclear program. The contract signed in 1986 for the construction of the Dian Bay power plant was a pact of trust between France and China, between EDF and GNP-GVC, the Guangdong Nuclear Corporation created for that purpose. A pact of trust, in addition to training dozens of Chinese engineers who have come to France to work in EDF power plants. China asked EDF to manage the project and guarantee its successful completion. I am proud to have been the Chinese company's first technical manager. A pact of trust, because very quickly the 100 or so highly qualified Chinese engineers in charge of observing, monitoring, and questioning our practice were, at their request, integrated into EDF's engineering teams. We are no longer under surveillance, but partners, a truly integrated team. A pact of trust because when EDF studies the upgrading after 10 years of operating in the Gravelines power plant, the Dian Bay reference, it offers without hesitation to make available to GNP-GVC the 110 modifications, the invaluable fruit of how acquired over hundreds of years of feedbacks. China will appreciate this gesture. As of further acts of trust, shortly before Dian Bay was commissioned, GNP-CVC asked EDF to take responsibility for the first few years of operation. EDF then sent some 60 operators to start up the plant and train the Chinese teams who, within a few years, would be taking the reins of their plant. In 1995, just as Dian Bay was coming on stream, CGNPC commissioned a second plant based on the same French model. On the same site, EDF will provide technical assistance and French companies will act as suppliers, but Linghao will be a Chinese power plant built under Chinese responsibility by Chinese companies. China has acquired its autonomy in this area. This will not prevent close cooperation between French and Chinese operators, exchanges of experience, spare parts, support in the event of incidents. Dayabe and Linghao take part in performance competition for French power plants, often winning first prize. This cooperation continues today between the operators of the 56 French reactors and the 36 Chinese reactors of the same technology. In 2007, CGN invited France to build 2 EPR reactors in the Taishan site, and EDF to invest alongside it. This agreement, unique in China's history, was signed for the plant's 50 years lifetime. The next step, in 2013, will be CGN's commitment to EDF to build and operate 2 EPRs at Hinkley Point in the UK, with a prospect to building 2 more Sizewell and 2 HPRs, the Chinese Hualong model at Broadwell. This cooperation is set to last a century. The partnership between France and China culminated in Premier Li Keqiang's trip to France at the end of June 2015. The joint declaration and deepening Franco-Chinese cooperation on civil nuclear energy is made public on the occasion of his visit. It provides for comprehensive cooperation, quote, from mining to reprocessing, in all areas of operation, the design of new medium and high power reactors, their construction in China, France, and third countries, the association of industrialists from both countries, and the construction of a reprocessing plant in China. All French companies, starting with Areva and Alstom, and the 100 or so members of the Partenariat France-Chine Électricité, this association, are involved in this agreement, which opens up immense prospects. Confidence is at its zenith. The industrial alliance between France, which has the world's most extensive operating experience, and China, which is going to build the biggest nuclear program in history, is an asset for both countries and beyond for the safety and progress of nuclear power worldwide. This historic partnership is the fruit of the work of men and women who have put their faith in projects to be built together and have given each other the trust. Today, they are tied by bonds of friendship. So all of this is good for both countries, and for the world. So this is a long work and friendship is now also here. In a field as strategic as nuclear energy, such a partnership is a cornerstone for building cooperation and peace between people and nations. And if today this cooperation has weakened somewhat under the effect of various negative influence, let us hope that it is revived. Its foundations remained intact, and it is certainly not only in the mutual interest of our two countries, but also a contribution to progress and peace in the world. Mr. Ambassador, Madam President, friends, all friends, I hope a great success for this seminar, and thank you for hearing me.
Now we come to the last presentation in this panel. It's a video which we will see from Alain Gachet. He's a water specialist and president of Radar Technologies International, RTI. He's the inventor of the Vortex water exploration process for locating aquifer resources by satellite in France. And this presentation, the video will be introduced by Jacques Cheminade, with the title Water for Peace and Development. Jacques?
It's a brief introduction to the introduction of Alain Gachet to show you the importance of what he's doing for the mutual development. Water will become each day more a challenge for peace in the world. The peace by the integrated development of resources and for mutual development. On the scale of France, we will have 10%, between 10 and 40% of water available in less in the year coming. And the challenge won't be to multiply the big swimming pool. So there will be a diagonal of first of water decreasing in all China, Southwest Asia. So the challenge that we have to get. So because the consumption of unsafe water causes over 2.5 million deaths a year worldwide. So all the refugees to be found in the streets and under the bridges of Europe have all one thing in common. They come from countries that are cruelly short of water. Sudan, Eritrea, Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, Kurdistan, Afghanistan, Syria, and many others. Not to act in this case is criminal because they are solutions. Starting with reducing water leakage, which is often enormous, stopping soil sealing, restoring wetlands where possible, recovering the precious liquid from wastewater treatment plants and subjecting it to additional treatment, filtration, disinfection by UV or chemical irradiation, to eliminate toxic substances and any health risks. In France, less than 1% of wastewater is treated, compared with 8% in Italy, 14% in Spain, and 85% in Israel. However, all this is not enough, particularly in the poorest countries most affected. So the challenge is not to deprive the existing aquatic environment of too much water supply by redirecting flows. Similarly, the desalination of seawater, successfully used in Saudi Arabia and California, would be too energy intensive on a global scale. So the retention of evaporating surface water today needlessly depletes underground resources for water-hungry agricultural practices. Beyond the useful but insufficient approaches I have just mentioned, my friend Alain Gachet tells us that water is waiting for us underground. This underground water does not evaporate or pollute, and its resources are 100 times greater than all the lakes and rivers on the Earth's surface. It will enable us to make shared water the best weapon for peace and respectful life. It will also enable us to replant forests that are burning and restores soils that are being depleted and eroded. Aquifers can be located by satellite using X-rays, and the water can be pumped out with drilling tools that can go deep enough, just like the oil companies can do, and not the water management agencies. Clearly, it's all a matter of political will, putting human life before immediate profit. For 20 years now, Alain Gachet, his friends and collaborators have been fighting from Darfur to Iraq, without forgetting Kenya and Costa Rica, to successfully test his means of action and make people realize that there are solutions that are not being implemented for a moment. For the Schiller Institute, exploiting water resources for all is an essential element, along with the health system for all, for social justice and peace through mutual development. The West, which claims to be so concerned about the plight of women, must realize that access to water without having to travel long distances is the beginning of their liberation. Patricia Lalonde, advisor on sustainable development at the United Nations, asserts that strong political will is needed and that, I quote, "This requires the rapid implementation of an international agreement on groundwater which accounts for 90% of planet's fresh water," end quote. So now I let Alain Gachet show you his approach, currently being tested in Niger as part of a vast program with the MCC in Washington, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, with no ulterior motive other than the joy of seeing water bring life for the common good. So here is Alain Gachet. So Radar Technologies International Exploration enables investors to make informed and accessible decisions to respond to the issues raised by climate change, including the deficit in surface drinking water. So RTI Exploration is a company specialized in the exploration of underground resources. For nearly 20 years, RTI Exploration has been involved in the search for underground drinking water at the request of international organizations such as the United Nations and major international institutions. RTI Exploration invented the WATEX system built on a solid foundation of scientific excellence, which combines in a complex algorithm mega databases linked to a broad spectrum of geoscience, such as remote sensing, hydrology, geology, geophysics, and climatology. The WATEX system is a scalable and replicable scientific tool. Since its invention in 2004, it has been used to explore potable and renewable groundwater resources. Nearly 2,700 wells have been drilled worldwide with a 98% success rate. This unique tool has been successfully audited for the technical credibility of the concept by the most reputable institutions, including the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey of the American Department of the Interior in 2004. Faced with the consequences of climate change, which are reflected in the extreme droughts, with the advance of deserts, extreme floods, mega forests, fires, aggravated by demographic pressure, surface water from lakes and rivers is no longer sufficient to meet the vital needs of the world populations. Groundwater has become the priority objective of the WATEX system, because groundwater is 100 times more abundant than surface water. This groundwater is the water of the future, provided that the consumption of this water is compensated by the replenishment for sustainable management. Faced with a worsening climatic distress that is affecting all the countries in the Sahel zone, condemning seasonal crops, RTI Exploration's activity is now focused on the development of sustainable irrigated agriculture and of forestation in Niger, Kenya, Ethiopia, Iraq, as well as in Costa Rica, Chile, and Peru. RTI Exploration has launched its first cluster of prosperity in northern Kenya, in the arid Turkana County. These are protected agricultural zones designed to guarantee water and food security for vulnerable communities. These communities contribute themselves to the running of the decentralized solar-powered agricultural projects. The resulting environmental and economic benefits, visible in just a few weeks, helped these communities to fix these populations and their hearts around these agricultural projects. On a broader scale, the WATEX system allows for the development of master plans for land use planning, such as in Costa Rica, a country that lives off green tourism. The WATEX study of the entire country with the support of international institutions, including when it's implemented, WATEX permits the autonomy, energetic autonomy of each center of production, the reforestation to reduce the climatic extremes, and permits the rechargement of groundwaters, and permits not the soil to be eroded, and also the development of strategic industries, mineral industries. Dr. Alain Gachet, mining engineer, physicist, and geologist, is a talented researcher at the origin of the invention of the WATEX system. He also held important responsibilities for 20 years with the exploration production of Herve Aquitaine in Kazakhstan, Syria, and Qatar, and as Secretary General of ELF in Congo-Brazzaville, and then as a game changer in the research and innovation cell of Shell International. So RTI exploration and the WATEX system were awarded by the Space Foundation in 2016 on the recommendation of NASA for improving the lives of millions of people around the world. Nous avons
presentations and concepts, and we'll take about 15 minutes for a discussion with our distinguished speakers here. So please, I guess we have a microphone here, and then ask your questions. The discussion period about the first panel we are going to have in the end of the third panel. So just that you know. So please direct your questions now to our speakers here. And yes, so you are welcome to come up or show if you want to ask a question. Somebody will bring you the mic. Yes, here. Yeah, that's the best.
Place it in the middle? No. Have someone?
Take your chance. Or maybe if one of the speakers wants to share your thoughts about what you heard so far, that's also a possibility. Yes.
Je voulais dire simplement un mot. Ce qui n'est pas fait par nous est bien pire que ce qui est fait. C'est-à-dire, vous avez vu là toute l'extension qu'on pourrait faire.
You saw here the extension of the all we can do to make peace possible, and everything that's needed to make that possible. And I think that's the challenge for today, that everybody in this room
This can be a provocation, but also an inspiration to do everything you can as in education, public health, water, resources, to make the world naturally inclined to respect one another and to mutual development. Thank you. Okay, well, of course, I perfectly agree with this. I worked a long time in Afghanistan myself to help out with Afghan women and to build schools. And I can tell you that the smallest school that we built in the most remote part of Afghanistan completely transformed the village, the area around it, the vision of people living there. As Mrs. Moanda spoke, as I told her, I also worked with women in Mali, and I met many people like you who are absolutely remarkable. And I think it's a lot of things like this that can make a big difference. I'm going to come back to what was said in the first panel about the idea that the Mediterranean has become a mass grave and that our young people are dying in the sea. And to change that, of course, we don't have all the solutions, but this week of science is a first step, and the follow-up, an idea of follow-up would be to do that in partnership and to do it with startups that can be created, because we can find the young people who have innovative ideas, but the problem that arises is always for the finances. So we need to have startups with these young people, and then this will change the community. It will help develop these people. And leaving the country will no longer be the only perspective that they have in mind. It will be a way to develop their creativity. And this will be another way to change the nature of the Mediterranean that has become by calling upon the creativity of these young people who are creative and who are only waiting to be able to contribute. I just wanted to add that this will be able to. This is a way to reverse the migration flows. Thank you. Hello, I'm from Karlsruhe. I have one question to you, Mrs. Moanda. As a woman from the Congo, what do you think about the water dam project for the Congo River that was presented by the South African minister or the Prime Minister on the Kivu Lake or the Inga Dam? Inga. Well, this in fact is not a new project. The Inga 1 and Inga 2 and Inga 3, they were functional. Myself, having lived in Congo and seen to what extent we have really, really big problems of electricity. You might go for 1 week or even 2 weeks with no electricity. So, of course, it's interesting not only to to conserve and take care of the now existing dams on the Inge, but to be able to use them fully functional. But I'd just add to that we need some very big infrastructures there. And I think we should also work with very local, small structures so that electricity is not just centralized in one spot, but is decentralized into various small villages. And we need all of these, the very big ones like the Inga projects, and on the other hand, the small projects like these solar projects in villages. So I think we need both of these. Is that an answer to your question? Hello, I'm Adali Diala. Thank you for your interventions. I have a question for other panelists, if you would. Today we see that there are many structures, many humanitarian structures in Africa. I come from the region of Sahel, from Burkina Faso, and so I'm asking this question if I'm talking about the humanitarian structures who are working for the return or for projects like Watex for water. These populations are the victims of a conflict that they don't really know the causes of. But the idea of UNATIS is but shouldn't we concentrate a lot on security before we go further into other? Because there are many humanitarian structures in the Sahel that are present on site, but the population is not even there anymore because of the security situation. And the terrorist groups or the rebels take advantage of this absence of other people. So for you, do you think these humanitarian structures are somehow profitable, or they're profitable for the security of this region? Because if you've invested there and you send your humanitarian forces there, and 1 month later the population has to leave because of the rebels, and then we see that the billions that have been invested there are not used. So I think my analysis is that we need to think about security before we invest in these areas. And that's what I've seen from the presence of humanitarian structures there up till now. So, could you please clarify your question? You want to know if the presence of humanitarian structures somehow are working against the population instead of serving them. Oh, he has no microphone. If these humanitarian NGOs are they not contributing to the maintaining the status quo, or even to the continuation or the pursuit of these rebel groups? Helge wants to answer.
Bon, moi je peux donner mon point de vue. Ce serait mentir.
It would be a lie to say that that all the humanitarian groups are efficient. or effective. I don't want to make any big generalities, but there are certain things that work, things that need to improve, other things that should be outlawed. Many errors were committed by humanitarian groups, but I have the impression, or would like to believe, that they are rethinking their approach. In the past, we had a lot of so-called white saviorism, where the young children would be sent to dig wells, and there was a big publicity made around it with photos and videos and so on. But I would hope that these groups are now calling into question their own role. And for me, the best aid is to enable local groups, to let the local residents mobilize. And when we mobilize the people, and if we just send groups in and when they leave, everything falls apart, then it's really not worth it. So we need to enable the populations who are already there.
I have a question to Mrs. Lalonde. Because, the Schiller Institute is not just a place to discuss the problems, but we also want to engage the participants of the conference in activities. Now, I know that you are circulating a petition to end the sanctions in Syria, and I would like you to again argue for that, because I really would like the participants of this conference to join in to make a very powerful mobilization to end these sanctions, because they are clearly killing the population, and they did not accomplish to get rid of the government of President Assad. So why keep these sanctions when it is so clear that it's bordering genocide to keep them up? I would like you to speak a little bit about it, given the fact that you were just in Syria and you saw how they have an effect on the population. And then maybe also call on the audience to help to, promote it in Europe as well.
We have launched a petition, that's right, with the France-Syria Association for an end to the sanctions, and it's been signed a lot, but we're in a country where, how can I say it? We get no media coverage. We sent it to AFP. It wasn't covered. It wasn't published. You saw what I said before about the response of Mrs. Colonna about Syria joining the Arab League. It's the same thing for the European Union. They just push the dust under the rug. It's the geopolitics of it is too complicated, so we don't talk about it. That's the policy. You can sign the petition. I can send it to you. But what is really discouraging is that there are many people who are up in arms about what's happening in Syria and who want to do something. But there's this blocking, and I think we can arrive at something, but it takes time.
Yes, I think it's very important that you make this resolution available so that all the participants here can share it and see what they can do with it. That would be great. Thank you. So now on this panel, I would like to give the final word to Jacques Cheminade.
I think there's a fundamental point here that was raised. If you make a project, this project must be accepted and taken over as its own by the population. The population has to be integrated into the project. That's the first thing. And then its implementation will assume that the population participates in it. And what we saw here about education, in particular of young women, of young girls, we should do the same thing for economic projects and public health projects. We create a certain milieu where the population is interested in what will help them, where the population believes or is convinced that they will be able to improve their destiny. And I think with the Lake Chad, we have something very interesting, where we had the farmers, the fishermen, the cattlemen, cattle raisers, who could come together and discuss together, to discuss how important it would be to develop Lake Chad and to make this area rich. And this Inga project, which exists, should at least be able to function with an electricity network that actually works. So we need a participation to make it work. Sometimes groups come in, organizations come, they don't know, they think that Africans don't know what's good for Africa, and that's disastrous, because they come in with the idea that the nature has to be protected against the population. And there are many books that denounce this form of green colonialism. So we need to have this sense, as Dora said. We have to understand the importance of science for everybody, and in particular for women, who will immediately see the advantage when they see what this means for justice, for developing the family. And this organization of the family, which builds into the family of all of the region and then of all of Africa. And for that, we have a mission, and our mission, as she does and as Patricia does for Syria, we have to make it known, and we have to give people the sense that they can also find in Europe. In France is the most pessimistic country of all. Get the people here to fight for this perspective. And in that way, we'll feel much better with ourselves by waging this fight. And the people who are here, when we are able to change things here in our own countries. Thank you.
So thank you all, the participants of the panel, and of course you, the audience. So we'll continue with the third panel. So I ask the speakers to come up here, and the discussion process is going to continue. So have a good third panel. Thank you.